So good morning, people. I'm so glad you decided to spend the morning with us. As spiritualists, we spend a lot of time talking about and to our ancestors, forefathers, relatives, and friends on the other side. And they always seem to have wonderful things to say about our life and how we're doing, but we don't ever really talk about what they are experiencing. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. It's a rather large subject, and I know we'll cover more in at least one more sermon, but we'll start today. There are several ancient texts from various civilizations that describe the concept of dying and one's subsequent journeys into the afterlife. Texts such as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Islamic Book of the Dead, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is actually named the Bardo Thodol. The ancient Tibetans used the word bardo to describe the space between lives. The word literally means the space that separates islands. In the late 8th century, a Buddhist Lama hid several of the Tibetan texts describing bardo in stone, lakes, and pillars in order to preserve them for future generations. According to legend, it was believed that the then Buddhists were not ready to accept the teachings in the texts and therefore might seek to destroy them. In 1927, Dr. Evans Wentz, an author and researcher, sat for years at the feet of Tibetan lamas known as teachers of the texts in order to learn about Bardo. He later compiled, edited, and published the first English edition of the Tibetan Book of the Dead under Oxford University Press. Much of the translation of the texts was performed by Tibetan Buddhists. By 1986, Joel Whitten, professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto, conducted 13 years of research into bardos, and with the assistance of Joe Fisher, released the findings in the book Life Between Life. This research using life between lives regression that involved 30 medical case histories was the first of its type. Therefore, they could be known as the founding fathers of the life between lives process. In addition, their findings were uniquely correlated with the teachings of prominent historical spiritual figures. Soon after their publication, many hypnotherapists began regressing their past life clients through the death scene into the life between lives memories. In 1996, Michael Newton, PhD, a licensed counselor, expounded on the work of Whitten and Fisher by standardizing the approach in his book, Journey of Souls. Through standardization of what he refers to as stations, more of his clients reported having similar memories of life between lives from one session to the next. His approach, therefore, is more directed than Whitten's and Fisher's, a research based using non-directive hypnotherapeutics. He later described these stations in the book Destiny of Souls. Wonderful books. While effectively popularizing the approach through his writing and by his standardization approach, he's been cited by educators and authors for limiting the client's experience, as later it became obvious through documented case histories that there were an almost limitless number of places or stations where clients had very different experiences than Newton published in his book. Another common criticism is how he consistently leads clients away from having any past life memories of Atlantis. He would state, okay, let's stop for a moment. I want you to take your time here and think carefully about what you just told me. We won't speak to each other until you have reviewed all of your memories to verify that you are in Atlantis. Then he directs, after you finish your examination of just where you are, I want you to notify me by raising your fingers on your right hand. I will not speak again until I see your fingers move. He claims that after a long pause, their client admits they were wrong and describes another place or scene. In his writings, he also claims he's skeptical about this unknown mythology and labels this concept the Atlantis distraction. He also claims he has never encountered religious figures in any of his sessions, while numerous other hypnotherapists claim they have. Nonetheless, He's often credited with being one of the first professional educators, with Dr. Alan Chips, of a beautiful process that can be easily taught and has been passed on to many hypnotherapy schools' curriculums. Because of this, many hypnotherapists have begun to offer the numerous benefits of this service to their clientele. So let's talk about some of the things that Dr. Newton has learned and shared in his books. The subjects Dr. Newton worked with described a tunnel effect that they experienced when leaving Earth, which is the portal into the spirit world. Although souls leave their bodies swiftly, entry into the spirit world is a carefully measured process. Later, when we return to Earth in another life, the route back is described as being more rapid. The location of the tunnel in relation to the Earth has some variations between the subjects' accounts. Some newly dead people see it opening up right next to them, right over their bodies, while others say they move high above the Earth before they enter the tunnel. In all cases, however, the time lapse in reaching this passageway is negligible once the soul leaves the Earth. After some initial uncertainty, subjects generally reflect an inviting sense of well-being. Once through the tunnel, our souls have passed the initial gateway of the journey into the spirit world. Most now fully realize that they have died, but that they haven't died, but are simply leaving the encumbrance of an earth body which has died. With this awareness comes acceptance in varying degrees depending on the soul. The most common type of reaction Dr. Newton hears is a relieved sigh, followed by something on the order of, "Oh, wonderful, I'm home in this beautiful place again." There are those highly developed souls who move so fast out of their bodies that much of what's described here is a blur as they go home into their spiritual destinations. These are the pros, and they appear to be a distinct minority on Earth. The average soul does not move that rapidly, and some are very hesitant. If we exclude the rare cases of highly disturbed spirits who fight to stay connected with their dead bodies, it's the younger souls with fewer past lives who remain attached to Earth's environment right after death. Most subjects report that as they emerge from the mouth of the tunnel, things are still unclear for a while. And this is due to the density of the nearest astral planes surrounding the Earth. Here's a case study from Journey of Souls. Dr. N says, as you move further away from the tunnel, describe what you see around you in as much detail as possible. Subject says, things are layered. Layered? In what way? Sort of like a cake. Using a cake as a model, explain what you mean. Subject says, I mean, some cakes have small tops and are wide at the bottom. It's not like that when I get through the tunnel. I see layers, levels of light, and they appear to be translucent. Do you see the spirit world here is made up of a solid structure? Subject says, that's what I'm trying to explain. It's not solid, although you might think so at first. It's layered. The levels of light are all woven together in stratified threads. I don't want to make it sound like things are not symmetrical. They are. But I see variations in thickness and color, refractions in the layers. They also shift back and forth. I always notice this as I travel away from Earth. So why do you think this is so? I don't know. I didn't design it. This is from your description. I picture the spirit world as a huge tier with layers of shaded sections from top to bottom. Subject says, yes, and the sections are rounded and curve away from me as I float through them. From your position of observation, can you tell me about the different colors of layers? Subject says, I didn't say they had colors. They are all variations of white. It's lighter, brighter where I'm going than where I've been. Around me now is a hazy whiteness that was much brighter than the tunnel. Doctor says, as you float through the spiritual layers, is your soul moving up or down? Is that the question? Neither. I am moving across. Well then, do you see the spirit world at this moment in linear dimensions of lines and angles as you move across? So because for me, it's mostly sweeping non-material energy that's broken into layers by light and dark color variations. I think something is pulling me into my proper level of travel and trying to relax me too. In what way? I'm hearing sounds. What sounds? An echo of music, musical tingling, wind chimes, vibrating with my movements. So relaxing. Doctor says other people have defined these sounds as vibrational in nature, similar to riding on the resonance from the twang of a tuning fork. Do you agree or disagree with this description? So yes, that's what it is. And I have a memory of scent and taste too. Does this mean our physical senses stay with us after death? Yes, the memory of them. The waves of musical notes here are so beautiful. Bells, strings, such tranquility. So with the subjects who speak about spiritual layering, Dr. Newton mentions the possibility that they could be seeing astral planes. In metaphysical writing, we read a lot about the planes above the earth, beginning with ancient Indian scriptures called the Vedas, followed by later Eastern texts. Astral planes have historically represented a series of rising dimensions above the physical or tangible world, which blend into the spiritual. These invisible regions have been experienced by people over thousands of years through meditation, out-of-body observations of the mind. Astral planes also have been described as being less dense as one moves further away from the heavy influences of Earth. Further into the spirit world, the subjects will talk about buildings and being in furnished rooms. The state of hypnosis by itself does not create these images. Logically, people should not be recalling such physical structures in a non-material world, unless we consider these scenes of Earth's natural environment are intended to aid in the soul's transition and adjustment. These sites have individual meanings for every soul sharing their experiences. When the soul sees images in the spirit world which relate to places they've lived or visited on Earth, there's a reason. An unforgotten home, school, garden, mountain, or seashore are seen by souls because of a benevolent spiritual force that allows these terrestrial images to comfort us by their familiarity. Our planetary memories never die. They whisper forever into the soul mind on the winds of mythical dreams, just as images of the spirit world do in the human mind. Regardless of the state of mind right after death, these subjects are full of exclamations about rediscovered marvels of the spirit world, like that, rediscovered marvels. Usually this feeling is combined with euphoria that all their worldly cares have been left behind, especially physical pain. Above all else, the spirit world presents a place of supreme quiet and rest to the traveling soul. Although it may at first appear we are alone immediately following death, we are not isolated or unaided. Unseen intelligent energy forces guide each of us through the gate. New arrivals in the spirit world have little time to float around wondering where they are or what's going to happen to them next. Our guides and a number of soulmates and friends wait for us close to the gateway to provide recognition. Actually, we feel their presence from the moment of death because much of our initial readjustment depends on the influence of these kindly entities toward our returning soul. When we cross over and are met by our guides, Dr. Newton found the techniques they use at initial contact fall into two general categories. One, envelopment. Here, returning souls are completely cloaked by a large circular mass of their guide's powerful energy. As the soul and guide come together, the soul feels as though they are both encased in a bubble. This is the more common method, which the subjects describe as pure ecstasy, or the focus effect. This alternate procedure of initial contact is administered a little differently. As the guide approaches, energy is applied to certain points at the edges of the soul's etheric body from any direction of the guide's choosing. We might be taken by the hand or held by the tops of our shoulders from a side position. Healing begins from a specific point of the etheric body in the form of brushing caress followed by deep penetration. The choice of procedures depends on the preference of the guide and the condition of our soul energy at the time. In both instances, there is an immediate infusion of potent, invigorating energy while we are projected forward. This is the introductory phase of the journey to our eventual spiritual destination. The more advanced souls, especially if they are undamaged, usually do not require assistance from a living energy force. Healing emotional and physical energy, both in and out of the spirit world, emanates from a source of goodness. Positive energy flows to every part of the soul's being from the sender, whose own essence and wisdom is transmitted as well. Subjects are unable to explain the beauty and subtlety of this assimilation, except to say it resembles the flowing of rejuvenating electricity. When souls arrive at the gateway to the spirit world with energy that is in a deteriorated state, some of our guides engage in emergency healing. This is both a physical and mental healing exercise that takes place before the soul moves any further into the spirit world. One client died in an auto accident in his last life where his leg was severed. He reported this is what happened at the gateway as a result of his experience. When I reached the gateway, my guide saw the gaps in my energy aura and proceeded at once to push the damaged energy back into place. He molded it as clay to fill, reshape, and smooth out the rough edges and broken impulse to make me whole again. The etheric or soul body is an outline of our old physical body, which souls take into the spirit world. Essentially, it's an imprint of a human form we have not shed yet, like the skin of a reptile. This is not a permanent condition, although we might permanently create it later as a colorful luminescent shape or energy. We know damaged body imprints from a past life can influence the current physical form of some people, unless properly deprogrammed, so why not the reverse? There are souls who shed their body form completely at the moment of death. However, many souls with physical and emotional scars from life carry the imprint of this damaged energy back. You know what? I am sorry. I'm literally so hot. I have to sit down. I'm feeling really, really wobbly. I have to sit for a couple of minutes and we're running late. Would anybody like to read this? I really don't. Unless you're so. What part is second paragraph, regardless of the specific energy.
Okay. All right. See how long I last up here because I'll take So, regardless of the specific energy treatment received by the soul at the gateway to the spirit world, most all returning souls will continue on to some sort of healing station before finally joining their groups. All but the most advanced souls crossing back into the spirit world are meant by benevolent spirits who make contact with their positive energy and escort needy souls to quiet recovery areas. It is only the more highly developed souls with energy patterns that are still strong after their incarnations who return directly to their regular activities. The more advanced souls appear to get over hardship more quickly than others after a life. Most recovery areas for the returning soul involve some kind of orientation back to the spirit world. It may be intense or moderate in scope, depending on the condition of the soul. This usually includes a preliminary debriefing of the life just completed. Much more in-depth counseling would take place later with guides and group conferences and with our council of elders. The surroundings of recovery areas are identifiable earthly settings created out of our memories and what spiritual guides feel will promote healing. There are souls who have been so severely damaged they are detached from the mainstream of souls going back to a spiritual home base. Compared to all returning entities, the number of these abnormal souls is not large. However, what has happened to them on Earth is significant because of the serious effect they have on other incarnated souls. There are two types of displaced souls: those who do not accept the fact that their physical body is dead and fight returning to the spirit world for reasons of personal anguish, and those souls who have been subverted by or had complicity with criminal abnormalities in the human body. In the first instance, displacement is of the soul's own choosing, while in the second case, spiritual guides deliberately remove those souls from further association with other entities for an indefinite period or indeterminate period. In both situations, the guides of those souls are intimately concerned with rehabilitation, but because the circumstances are quite different between each type of displaced soul, we will treat them separately. The first type we call ghost. Those spirits refuse to go home after physical death and often have unpleasant influences on those of us who would like to finish our own human lives in peace. These displaced souls are sometimes falsely called demonic spirits because they have produced because they are accused of invading the minds of people with harmful intent. The subject of negative spirits have produced serious investigations in the field of parapsychology. Unfortunately, this area of spirituality has also attracted a fringe element of the unscrupulous associated with the occult who prey on the emotions of susceptible people. The troubled spirit is an immature entity with unfinished business in a past life on Earth. They have no relation to the living person who was disrupted by them. Okay, and page. Oh my goodness. If we have a spirit world governed by order with guides who care about us, how can maladaptive souls who exert negative energy upon incarnated beings be allowed to exist? One explanation is that we still have free will, even in death. Another is that since we endure so many upheavals in our physical universe, then spiritual irregularities and deviations from the normal exodus of souls ought to be anticipated as well. Discarnate, unhappy spirits who trap themselves are possibly part of a grand design. When they are ready, those souls will be taken by the hand away from Earth's astral plane and guided to their proper place in the spirit world. We now turn to the more prevalent second type of disturbed souls. These are souls who have been involved with evil acts. We should first speculate if the souls can be considered culpable or guilt-free when it occupies the offending criminal brain. Is the soul mind of human ego responsible, or are they the same? Occasionally, a client will say, I feel possessed by an inner force which tells me to do bad things. There are mentally ill people who feel driven by opposing forces of good and evil over which they believe they have no control. After working for years with the superconscious minds of people under hypnosis, Dr. Newton has come to the conclusion that the five sensory human can negatively act upon a soul psyche. We express our eternal self through dominant biological needs and the pressures of environmental stimuli, which are temporary to the incarnated soul. Although there is no hidden, sinister self within our human form, some souls are not fully assimilated. People not in harmony with their bodies will detach from themselves in life. This condition does not excuse souls from doing their utmost to prevent evil involvement on Earth. We see this in human conscience. It is important we distinguish between what is exerting a negative force on our mind and what is not. Hearing an inner voice which may suggest self-destruction to ourselves or someone else is not a demeaning spiritual entity. an alien presence, nor a malevolent renegade guide. Negative forces emanate from ourselves. The destructive impulses of emotional disorders, if left untreated, inhibit soul development. I'll discuss in part 2 of this series of sermons how souls receive an initial review of their past lives guide before moving on to join their friends. But what happens to souls who have their bodies cause extreme suffering to others? If a soul is not capable of controlling the most violent human urges in its human body, how is it held accountable in the afterlife? This brings us to the issue of being sent to heaven or hell for good or bad deeds, because accountability has long been a part of our religious traditions. Does hell exist to permanently separate good souls from bad ones? All the casework Dr. Nugent has documented with the spirits of his subjects has convinced him there is no resonance of terrible suffering for souls except on earth. He has been told all souls go to one spirit world after death. Everybody is treated with patience and love. However, he has learned that certain souls do undergo separation in the spirit world, and this happens at the time of their orientation with guides. They are not sent along the same travel routes as other souls. Those subjects who have been impeded by evil report that souls whose influence was too weak to turn aside a human impulse to harm others will go into seclusion upon re-entering the spirit world. Those souls do not appear to mix with other entities in a conventional manner for quite a while. He also noted that these beginner souls who habitually associated with intensely negative human conduct in their first series of lives must endure individual spiritual isolation. Ultimately, they are placed together in their own group to intensify learning under close supervision. This is not punishment, but rather a kind of safe place or space for their restructuring of self-awareness with those souls. There is much more to cover from these books, and I hope you found it interesting. But now let's take time for meditation. Okay.
Getting you for a little while. Thank you, Connie. Told you guys I'm sensitive to the heat.
I get it, you too.
So, okay. Take a few deep breaths. I don't need music.
No, okay.
A few deep breaths. Just relax. Breathe in peace. Let your worries just flow like a river. So you can breathe, release. Allow the chair to support you. Relax a little more with each breath that you take. Relax. We're in a protected place right now, surrounded by all that's loving and good. To this safe and loving place, we're invited to just relax and open. Just breathe. Imagine your heart space expanding. As it does, we're going to invite one of your guides into this safe and loving space with you. You may see their loving light presence coming closer or hear them approach. You may just sense their presence as they go closer into your space. Just continue to breathe. Invite them closer. Knowing that even if you can't see them or hear them, they are assuredly there because you are them to be. Now would be a perfect time for you to ask them any questions you might have. It might be about a specific circumstance in your life, or general questions about what it's like where they are, what they experience. Any questions at all? Take a deep breath. You listen closely or feel closely for an answer. Trying to lead you to this experience as the means. With the hearing now. Take a deep breath. Release it as your loving guide moves further away from you. You're always ready to return when it comes. Another breath in and out. You're aware of your body again. One more breath. Feel more connected. And then open your eyes when you're ready.